Okay. It should be getting started here. Hello, everyone. This is Kevin O'Brien from Tosa Together. I'm happy to welcome you to Tosa Talks, Building a Diverse, Thriving Community, an ongoing Facebook Live series proudly sponsored by our generous friends at Bostik. Excuse me. This three-track series provides learning opportunities and fosters meaningful discussions around racial and social justice issues in an effort to help build an inclusive, anti-racist community. Tosa Talks highlights the experience and efforts of all sorts of folks, local neighbors, community leaders, business owners, employees, and government and organizational representatives, as well as provides relevant and sought after information from local experts on anti-racist, equity, and inclusion issues. Tonight, we continue our Equity and Inclusions Issues track, which streams live at 7 p.m. on the third Wednesday of every month, with a great discussion on being an ally to people of color. We hope you'll also join us for the Government Departments and Organizations track that streams live on the last Thursday of each month, and for the Personal Stories track on the second Tuesday of each month. Every Tosa Talks presentation includes an interactive question and answer session, and we encourage you to add your comments and questions in the comments sections under this video. Tonight's conversation will also be recorded and available for later viewing on the Tosa Together YouTube channel. So without further delay, it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's Equity and Inclusion host, Sienna Lytle, who will introduce tonight's presenter.
Hi everyone, I'm Sienna, and I'm so excited about our event tonight. Chauntel McKenzie is going to be joining us tonight. She is an award-winning speaker, trainer, coach, brand builder, and author passionate about partnering with community members, corporate leaders, entrepreneurs, and organizations to ensure their visions, goals, and projects are successful. In 2015, Chauntel left her successful corporate positions in order to form the Power Network, one of the fastest growing and diverse networks for women in the nation. The Power Network is committed to building, inspiring, and connecting women with their dreams, purpose, and one another. Chauntel is an outspoken advocate for equity in the workplace and in every aspect of community. She draws on years of experience and training to offer insight and information that helps build allyship for people of color, and firmly believes that powerful things happen when women support other women, workers support other workers, and community members support one another. So it is my sincere pleasure to welcome Chauntel McKenzie to Tosa Talks.
Hi, how are you?
Fantastic, fantastic. Super excited about our conversation tonight. So I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions or comments, to make sure to put them in the comment box. And Chauntel's going to let you guys know how you can text questions as well.
Yes, so the Power Network has the great pleasure of hosting a quarterly diversity dialogue. We've done this for almost 2 years now. Pre-COVID, we would do them in person, but since then we've been doing them online. And we found that when there's some anonymity involved in the questions, we just get to have a deeper, more candid conversation. So if you've got your phone or a pen handy, write down this number. It's 414-788-4205. Again, that's 414-788-4205. And as we're talking, we want you guys to engage in the conversation. So you definitely can text us our questions and we will answer them. And if I happen to have your number stored in my phone, I won't be like, hey, Sue asked. It will stay anonymous. And we just want to make sure that you leave here having gotten what you need. So please feel free to ask questions in whichever manner you feel comfortable.
Awesome, awesome. So our conversation tonight is about being an ally to people of color. So why don't we start off with, what does it mean to be an ally? How do you define that?
So this term ally has just garnered so much attention similar to diversity inclusion this year, just as of late with so many things happening. And so I feel like it's losing a little bit of its umph. And so I heard someone in the conversation talk about making the transition from ally to accomplice. And I love that thought process. But truly, to be an ally really means that you are authentically using your voice and supporting people of color. You're sponsoring individuals of color. You are using inclusive language, and you're also standing up and not being complicit in areas where you know that there is racial injustice happening, or even a conversation that happens that could be demeaning or insulting to a person of color. And so that's how I look at true allyship. Also, typically a true ally is not walking around thumping their chest saying, hey, I'm an ally. The people of color around them are saying to them, we appreciate your allyship and that you are being a true ally to us. And so if you're looking at yourself in the mirror saying, hey, I'm a great ally, because you don't have any people of color around you to say that to you, then it may be time to just kind of regroup on what that means.
Right, exactly. So I love that you pointed out, the responsibility that comes with being an ally. What would you say the benefits are? So if someone is deemed an ally by the people that they are supporting, what do they benefit from that?
Well, we live in a global society that is becoming more and more diverse by the day. And so it only enriches our lives and our businesses and our communities to collaborate and to be allies unto one another. And so there are many, many studies that show that having a more diverse workforce, having a more diverse friendship circle, having a more diverse perspective on life and understanding and knowledge-based period improves the way in which you interact with people, improves the amount of money that you make. And also, I know I'm a parent, and so for those of you watching who are parents, you being an ally and you modeling the behavior of what true allyship is, which is an attribute of true leadership, I believe, then gives that example to those coming behind us and to our next generation, which is going to do nothing but make the world better, because we don't tend to create what we want. We tend to create who we are. So our children will eventually become a reflection of who we are and what we exemplify to them. And so hopefully we exemplify a diverse circle of friends, colleagues, and inclusiveness.
Right. I love that. And I think that is really important, about including people in your circle of friends and really having meaningful connections. I think that is the baseline of what's expected when you're an ally, is to have a true connection. There's a lot of concepts about empathy and compassion that are important when we're talking about being an ally. I really think that is the ground, that's the foundation of what's needed. So how does a white person kind of begin to understand the Black experience of someone in our city or in our country, starting in that place of empathy and compassion? How do they go beyond that to really try to understand or comprehend the experience?
I think first and foremost, that this is a conversation that I've had, I won't say the pleasure of having, but I've had the opportunity to educate friends, colleagues, and just community individuals. It really is incumbent upon the person who wants to get there to do a self-education. And so there are so many amazing books, documentaries. And I mean, I know the hot one right now is White Fragility. I always recommend Mara Cullen's book, 35 Stupid Things That Well-Intended People Say, because a lot of times we just don't know what we don't know. But as far as showing compassion and empathy, there's a fine line between doing that and making people of color feel like they're all in need and in need of being raised up, because that's not necessarily the case. And so it's racism is not an issue amongst the people of color, unfortunately. Based on the history of this country, it is really important that those that are true allies and aspire to maintain that place of allyship go on this continuous track of learning and hopefully have some authentic connections, like you mentioned, that they can have some candid conversations. I always say my hope with my friends, with my white friends, is that I am not your Black friend, I'm your friend that happens to be Black. And so that we can get beyond that space and that place, that we're friends, because that is the most critical thing. I don't want to ever be, and I don't think any person of color ever wants to be the friend for the sake of you showing, oh, look at me, I'm an ally. But the longing, to your point, is for true, authentic connection, and to understand that at the end of the day, we're more alike than we are different. And it's going to take all of us in order to diffuse and to improve a lot of the things that are happening in our country, in our city, and even in the community of Wauwatosa itself.
Right. Absolutely. Those connections are very, very important. And I think I really like what you said about, I'm not just the Black friend, I'm your friend that's Black, or because I think that in itself, even though the intentions are good, that in itself is othering in a way, right? And so being educated and educating yourself as an ally is super important, so you can understand those things. Why don't we talk a little bit about what that education looks like, right?
Sure.
I remember when I was younger, I grew up in the suburbs and was most of the time the only Black kid in class. And I remember in social studies, anytime we started learning about slavery, the entire room would look at me. And I felt like I was kind of forced into a position to be the educator and to be the representative of the entire Black race and everything that comes with that. And so I think it's important to stress to people, Black people are not a monolith. We're different, but we share this culture and we share this experience of living in America. So let's talk a little bit about what that education looks like. You talked about books, but how important is it for an ally to not require that Black friend or that Black person in their life to be their educator?
Absolutely. It's exhausting. There is a play that was on Broadway that's been adapted to a movie on Netflix called American Son with Kerry Washington. And she talks about being the face of the race. And a lot of African Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans find themselves in that place where they're one of the only, be it at school, in a workplace of a certain position. I went to Milwaukee School of Engineering. I was one of the few African American women that was there. There were, quite a few African women, but to the point of us all being different, that's not the same as being an African American woman. And so the same as, there's Germans and Polish and, Irish, etc. The same with African Americans. We all have different backgrounds, etc. And so the education it should be about self-learning. So it starts with books. It also goes with watching things like this. The YWCA has an amazing program around race relations. Shout out to Jenny Finn. It starts with getting outside of your community and your comfort zone and purposefully and surrounding yourself with people who don't look like you, and taking a moment to create some relationships across the color lines. there's so many documentaries out here, and just really understanding, and not just understanding from necessarily African Americans that live in your neighborhood, whose kids go to your school, but even understanding when you're watching the news and you see something happening in an inner city neighborhood that perhaps you have never been to, or don't have a reason to come to, and you're wondering, why is there so much, one of the favorite media terms is black on black crime. Well, even that term in itself is a term that was created to cause dissension and to plant a negative seed as it relates to African Americans. When if you really look up homicide statistics, white on white crime is just as prevalent as far as the numbers. And but you don't hear that statement. That's not a statement. Like, it's not a household term like black on black crime. So that's the type of education that really most people just, it goes, over their head, because you don't know, again, what you don't know. So then it is incumbent upon us as adults to figure out what it is that we don't know and where that knowledge base is, and go out and seek it. And I definitely don't mind adding clarity for my white friends around something that they don't understand. But if it starts to feel like that our connection is just based on me teaching you about the Black experience, that's tiring. And that's not something that anyone of color is interested in.
Right, exactly. And I like you said, you can watch events like this and definitely learn a lot. There's so many resources out there, and so many entities and organizations that are there to kind of direct and help navigate people on that path to kind of being more enlightened and to be an ally. But you mentioned something about like black on black crime, and how that term in itself is kind of a racist term on purpose, but kind of woven into general conversations sometimes. And it made me think about, as an ally is educating themselves, it starts with empathy, it starts with compassion. And I think really the big next step is really becoming enlightened to and realizing that there are, systems in our country that are inherently racist. And, we like to say right now a hot topic is police brutality, right? And a lot of people in conversations about that talk about the criminal justice system and how it's broken. But you don't really think that, right? It's not broken. It is working the way it was created to be. It's a system that was created as a racist system. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. There is a lot of talk around how do we fix the system, and how do we, from mass incarceration to anti-recidivism causes and things like that. And at the end of the day, these systems are working in the way that they were designed to work. And so it's really not about fixing them. It's about creating an actual system that provides equity for everyone. And so at the time that the Constitution was written, at the time that the country was founded, it was done when slavery was legal. And it was done at a time that all men weren't created equal, in the eyes of our founding fathers, because people of color were not even considered, Black people in particular, were not even considered people. They were considered property. And so when we look at the systems, we have to be honest and about how they were built, the history of them, understand the history of it, understand things like redlining, as far as how people weren't given access to the GI Bill, which is how a majority of Americans purchased their first home, and how African Americans were drafted in record numbers to fight in the Korean War, Vietnam, etc., but then came home and were not given access to the same type of benefits that white soldiers were. And then even, I have a lot of friends who are Asian American, and when you hear their story about them immigrating here and after, post Vietnam and the Laos, the history of the Laos people and things like that, like the system was not created to function for anyone that wasn't white. And so now we have this world, like I said, that's becoming more and more diverse all of the time. And what are we going to do about it? Like, how do we fix it? And really, to me, I believe in legislation and I believe in laws being passed, and I'm thankful for everyone who has lost their life, risked their life for all of the freedoms that I enjoy. We have come so very far, but we still have so far to go. And, when you mentioned police brutality, from my perspective, it's not new. The cameras are new, and so now it's just, there's an opportunity for it to be recorded. And then we have social media now. And so there's an opportunity for it to go viral. And then once there's accountability out there, then there is a pressure put on our politicians to then go to action and to have an answer for what's happening. But I mean, from the times that, people were being lynched and there were the Ku Klux Klan was made up of politicians. And, even when we think about what just unfortunately happened in Kenosha with that young man taking the law into his own hands, it's just, there has to be more of what Tosa Together is endeavoring to do. And again, it's going to take all of us. It really is.
Absolutely. It takes everyone, because we all are in it. So absolutely. So I think, one of the concepts or the words that have come up a lot lately, something that people who I know as allies educated themselves on and have a really good understanding of, but something that a lot of people, and I'm talking about white people, are kind of trying to understand or wrestling with understanding, is the concept of white privilege. I've seen it discussed on every platform there is, especially this year when issues about race and racism are really in the spotlight for people that I guess didn't see it before. So let me ask you, what is your definition of white privilege, and why is it important to understand what that is when you're an ally?
And so the first thing is that if you're born white in this country, based on, what we just talked about with how it was founded and how the laws are written, then you're automatically born with a privilege that people of color are not, just from the perspective of you're not born into a society that automatically fears you based on the color of your skin, or may automatically discount your business acumen or your intelligence based on the fact that you're a person of color. And so the first thing, and you're right, it is become the buzzword of 2020, is that it's okay to acknowledge that it exists and that privilege is there. Now, once you acknowledge that you have privilege, the question is, what are you going to do with it? And so it's going to take a long time to create new systems. It took a long time to get here. Slavery was 400 plus years. And so, but yet slavery has only not been happening less than 200 years. And then we're not even going to get into segregation, Jim Crow, et cetera. So, racism it has not been that long that we've even gotten to the place that we're at now. And unfortunately, for people of color, some days it feels like we're going backwards, or we're living in a whole different century than we're living in right now. But I think the first thing is to acknowledge that you have privilege, because people of color know you have it. And so seems to be this sense of shame, because if I acknowledge that I have privilege, then I have to acknowledge that I benefit from it. And I have to acknowledge that maybe perhaps, I didn't play a part in that, or I am not racist, but perhaps there's something in my lineage that is. And it's not lost upon people of color, especially African Americans, who know our history of slavery and most of us can't trace our roots back, but only so far, because we weren't allowed to read, we weren't allowed to write, we were given last names based on our slave owners. And so that in itself, just white privilege is the fact that most white individuals, well, a lot of, I won't say most, I don't want to generalize, have had a longer opportunity to be educated, own businesses. When you look at the wealth in this country and you look at the history of the wealth in this country and you look at old money, that money was accumulated at a time where Blacks could barely have money. And that this is another education moment. There was a bank called the Freedom Bank that was created post the Civil War, and Blacks were encouraged to put their money there, and they were promised a certain amount of money if they fought in the war. Well, then someone white took over as the president of that bank, and he started using the African Americans' money as his own money, and most of those African Americans went broke, and there was no FDIC, it wasn't insured. And so at the time that they were saving money for their families and to buy land, etc., then it was taken away. There's so much land that even people of color bought legally that someone decided they wanted, and then it was taken away. I mean, we still have collegiate institutions like Harvard and Princeton and Yale that are just now acknowledging that their campuses were built by slaves and
Right.
people of color, and we weren't even allowed to attend those schools. So back to the point about privilege, it's the first thing is about the acknowledgement of it, and then deciding to do good with it, deciding to use it as a voice for others, deciding that if you know a person of color and there's an opportunity for you to give an opportunity. And this goes for people of color too, because we don't have the same type of privilege, but some of us who have had more education or more opportunities in the workplace, maybe in a different socioeconomic class than some of our peers and some other people of color. You know, the goal is, if you have the opportunity to have more than others, should be to create a longer table, not build taller walls. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to use our privilege to help others, because that's the only way we're going to make things better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's also, you know, a lot of people, when you talk about white privilege, they kind of go back to looking at it in an economical way, right? I've had conversations with people where they're like, you know, I've worked my whole life. I've worked really, really hard. I've earned everything I have. There's no way I'm not privileged. And really what it's about is the fact that, you know, anything that you benefit from in society, if you're white, you don't have to worry about that being infringed upon because of being white, right? So it goes beyond an economic standpoint. And like you said, it goes back so far that it's rooted in the systems, it's rooted in the history, that, you know, just because you didn't own slaves, or your fathers or your grandfathers didn't own slaves, you're still benefiting from the systems that were put in place because of the racism that occurred. So yeah, that's absolutely. And so now, okay, if I want to be an ally, I've got the hearts, I've got the compassion and the empathy. I'm surrounding myself with people of color and making connections. I am educating myself, reading the books, checking my white fragility when I need to. So what do I do now? How do I become the accomplice? Because an accomplice takes action, right?
And that is when you are starting to position people of color for opportunities. That is, you know, if you're in a place that you can do that, that is when you're, you know, one of the best ways to create authentic connection is to break bread with someone. So now, we're my girlfriend, Shanae Jenkins, who's the vice president of diversity inclusion for the YMCA of Southeast Wisconsin, has a shirt that she made that says ally on the front. And her breakdown for it is authentic leadership, yearning for change, and I'm probably butchering it, but it's something like that. But on the back of the shirt, my point is, it says you're invited to the barbecue, and meaning it's this inclusive thing of, I'm invited to your barbecue, you're invited to my barbecue. Our families are connected to one another. And so once you've done the education, you've gotten past your white fragility, you've acknowledged your privilege, now are you creating those authentic connections? And if there's an opportunity, say in the workplace, for you and a person of color, and that person of color would be great in your place, are you then being a sponsor? Are you being a sponsor and saying, I think Sienna would be great to speak on behalf of the department for this? I think that, are you giving those opportunities? That is critical, and that comes to that accountability part that so many people are. And then you also should amplify your voice. Silence is acceptance. And so many people are sitting back complicit. And so that's another thing that an ally does not do. And so once you have your awakening breakthrough moment, or if you were already born that way, then if you have racist relatives or friends, then you don't sit back in a complicit manner and listen to conversations that, if your friend of color or colleague of color was sitting there, you would not want that conversation happening. You speak up, you amplify your voice, and you let it be known, and you share your education with them. The people of color don't need the education. We understand what's happening. It is incumbent upon our allies to go in and educate more whites so we can continue to make change there.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I think that's really how allyship kind of multiplies, is when a white ally is having those conversations with the other white people in their lives. Right. It's imperative. Absolutely. Well, we have a couple of questions from the comments. Okay. I will throw them at you. Someone asked, are you hopeful that we can change these systems when so many don't believe it's a problem? That's a tough one. Hope is hard.
Yeah, hope is not a plan. And so, I mean, definitely as a mother, as a businesswoman, I remain hopeful that will change, that things will change. I'm not sure if it will happen in my lifetime. I will tell you that as scared as a lot of whites are of people of color, we're just as scared. I'm a mother of Black sons, and there is a conversation that people of color have to have with our children regarding the police. This goes back to privilege that white parents don't necessarily have to have. And it's about, how do you get home safe? How do you not reach for something? I don't want someone to think that you could possibly be reaching for a weapon, or that you could be doing something wrong. It's like, are your plates okay? Is your insurance up to date? Please just, let's not give the police any reason to think that you're making a misstep. And so again, hope is not a plan. We really need some plans around how we're going to enact change. And so, I like to live in the mantra of Gandhi of be the change you want to see. And so I think if each one of us can be the change that we want to see in the world, then we can hopefully start to make a ripple effect and at least make change in our area, which will hopefully continue to grow and grow and grow and grow.
Right. And it does take some effort and some action. I think solidarity is great, and that's something we've seen a lot of in the last few months. But I can hold a sign up in my house all day and have that heart of empathy, but not really make the change. So, you know, there's a lot of different ways to take action and really be that ally of boots on the ground. You know, if you can protest, great. If you can't, there's a lot of other things that you can do too to actually make change. So absolutely, that's important. Next question is, how do you respond to white people who push back on the idea of Black Lives Matter because of violence they're hearing about or seeing on TV?
I would say again that goes back to education, because and it goes back to understanding that Martin Luther King said it best. He said rioting is the language of the unheard. And so when you see people reacting and the protests becoming violent, you know, I always try to look for what the root of that is. There's been many stories that have shown that people are coming in from other communities and sparking violence to make things look worse than they are. Understand that there's two segments to Black Lives Matter. There's a nonprofit that was started under the moniker Black Lives Matter, but then Black Lives Matter is one of those statements that has taken on a life of its own. And so to lump everything under Black Lives Matter is really just, again, educate yourself around what's happening with the protests. And I don't know any freedom fight or any fight for fairness that has happened without some type of battle. I mean, I mentioned the Civil War. We talk about the Korean War, Vietnam. I mean, there is, people are trying to get heard. And the thing is that people of color are not even looking for special rights or special attention. They just want equal rights. We just want equal rights.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
When people grow frustrated, then unfortunately violence erupts because people emotions take over and they don't know what else to do. But don't let that deter you. I mean, I will say I had a feeling about Kenosha, and my sons who are 22 and 18 have been protesting. The young people do feel mobilized in this time. And I have been supportive of them protesting and prayerful about their safety. But I said to my 22-year-old in particular, please don't go to Kenosha. Just because as I was watching things unfold, I didn't feel comfortable. And unfortunately, look what happened there. But there, to your point of what you said, Sienna, there are other ways to protest. My platform is my protest most days. So the way that I use my social media, the way that I use my LinkedIn, the way that I use my voice in the community, the way that I use my voice amongst my allies, that is a form of protest. And please know that a majority of activists are focused on the Martin Luther King, John Lewis frame of thought of having it be a non-violent situation. And unfortunately, things escalate. And it's one of those, like my grandmother would say, you know, you don't want a few bad apples to spoil the bunch, but don't lump everyone in because of some things that have happened. Because if that's the case, that would be like me looking at that young man in Antioch that walked around with a gun and was given high fives by the police as he was walking around Kenosha. Yet Jacob Blake was shot in the back 7 times, which was the catalyst for the protest. And so how violent is that? And so just like we don't want to generalize one way, we don't want to generalize the other way. And so get out there and get to know. I've been out. I live downtown Milwaukee, very close to the Fiserv Forum. There are protests almost daily on our block. Majority have all been peaceful, if not all. And I go outside and I talk to some of the young people and some of the older people. And I would say go out and experience marching. I've marched in Washington, D.C. for women's rights. I've marched in Washington, D.C. for the rights of Black men. I've been there during presidential inaugurations. It is a powerful thing to be in the midst of people who are truly focused on change. And most of the time, it is done in a non-violent fashion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have another question. Can you speak to the idea of an ally? This is a good one, overstepping their role. It seems that it would be possible as an ally to take on more responsibility for fixing an inequitable situation and inadvertently take away or disempower the friend or colleague of color's voice. This is big because good. I think we're starting to see a lot of the racism that is in, you know, your liberal white friend. There is still some things that need to be adjusted and figured out. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I think that, you know, an overstep is to assume that African Americans are waiting on whites to save them, that they're looking for the great white hope. And that, you know, every African American you meet, be it a business owner or just a person, you know, needs you to come in and help lift them up and support their business. Because please know, there's a lot of African American community leaders and successful African Americans and African American educators who are fighting the good fight to make things better. Same in the Asian American community, same in the Hispanic community. And so I think the overstep is when the assumption is made that that there's pity that needs to be had, or that there is there's a savior complex. Like it's not about, again, it's not special treatment, it's equal treatment. And so born human, just like whites, born and so we just want to be given the same opportunities to raise our children, for our children to be educated, to live, for due process under the law. And so, yeah, that to me is when the overstep happens. Again, it's back to that statement I made earlier. Don't support my business because it's a Black business. Support my business because I provide excellent service, and then I also happen to be a Black business owner. And you know, and I know people are like, but wait, you know, what about the, you know, classifications of being a minority or woman-owned business? And those laws are important because bottom line, the system was not set up to make sure that companies like mine get a contract. And so that's why those laws were put into place. And so same with you know, EEOC and affirmative action. And so those laws were necessary and are necessary because there are still people who will not do the right thing and provide equitable treatment if not forced to do so. So it's sad that it has to be there, but there's a reason for that as well.
Right. Absolutely. This next question kind of talks a little bit about the systems. Someone asked, can you talk a bit about voter suppression and maybe how someone can be an ally in that arena of inequity?
Wow. So talk about voter suppression. Think about how many polling places we had back in spring. You know, I think that being in touch with, you know, the areas that are disadvantaged and most susceptible to voter suppression is important. You know, there are so many nonprofits, there's Souls to the Polls, there's so many voting rights. They come to mind, top of mind, because they've really been out here. But people need rights. People need to know where to vote. People are dropping off ballots. I mean, there's so much you can do to get out and volunteer. And it's another great way of expanding your knowledge base. If you leave Wauwatosa, come into the city and volunteer and really talk to some of the neighbors, talk to some of the constituents. And that is another way of showing that you overall care, that it's more than about your four and no more, you know, just meaning the people in your household. And so if you come into another neighborhood because you want to make sure that they have the same equal rights and opportunities that the residents of Tosa have, how great is that? How much have you amplified your voice, and how surprising would it be? And I will tell you, you will find people are welcoming. It's not as dangerous as the news and your social media feed presents it. We have to understand too, and being in the business of marketing and understanding the algorithm, social media, it is learning your behaviors, it's learning what you like, it's learning what groups you belong to. And so Sienna and I could be living in the same house. My husband and I talk about this all the time. And our news feeds could be completely different based on what we're telling Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, what we're interested in. And so that's why that self-education is so important. But back to voter suppression, volunteer to get out here and make sure that everyone's vote is counted. And that's the best way to do it. And do it beyond your neighborhood. Do it in the neighborhoods that seem to have the least opportunities to get there. I mean, and work the polling places. Get out there and volunteer.
Right. And I think, we need that more than ever now, because now is the time to be an ally, right? Because the systems that we talked about historically are, like you said, it's like it's repeating itself, and the stakes are getting higher and higher every single day. So it's really important to have those allies, because the way I look at it, this problem of racism in our country wasn't created by the people of color that live here. So we can't be fully responsible for solving it.
We can't
for
be responsible
ourselves,
at
right?
all. No.
Exactly. So yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that, like, now is the time. Take hold of this moment that we're in, because it is a moment that we're having.
It is.
And take hold of it and really give yourself the opportunity to, be the change that you want to see, right? I mean, I can't think of a better time to reach out, read the book, watch these events. Now is the time. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Watch some. I mean, if you're not a reader, there's so many movies, there's documentaries out there. Watch When They See Us, about the Central Park Five, now the Exonerated Five. Watch American Son. Watch Good Trouble, the biopic about John Lewis. Watch Marshall, which Chadwick Boseman, who just passed away, played the brilliant role of Thurgood Marshall. Amazon Prime Video. I mean, right now, because of COVID, there's so many less opportunities for us to get out and be social, that this is a great time to sit and educate yourself. And that is, to the point of what you talk about. I think that, because of the pandemic happening in conjunction with, George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder and Rashard Brooks' murder and Ahmaud Arbery's murder, because we're sitting still longer than we normally would, people they have their ears tuned in to what's happening. And so if there was ever a time to stand up and amplify your voice as an ally, it's now. It really is.
Absolutely. And when I know I have a friend who is taking that ally role, right? She is really stepping up to the plate. And one thing that she shared with me that she felt, that I can imagine a lot of people who are now kind of becoming aware to this moment, it's heavy. This is really, really heavy stuff. And, you talked earlier about, it's important for people not to have that savior complex and just look at everything, like Black people are just completely down and out, and we really need, saving. And so I think it's important. I always like to say that Black joy is a protest. That joy and inserting that into the moment is a great way to support when you're trying to be an ally. So can you talk a little bit about that really quick? We have a few more minutes, but I just want to kind of end on a note of how an ally can, insert joy, insert that positivity into the moment, and how that is valued as well.
Yeah, first of all, to people who feel heavy because in 2020, you're just realizing the state of the country. Just know, for people of color, it has been heavy. This is not new news to us. This is not like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. There are museums dedicated to the lynchings of African Americans.
Yeah.
You know, this is nothing new. I mean, from the time we're able to walk and talk, we are educated about the fact our parents tell us you got to work harder, you got to get up earlier, you got to stay later, because there is this expectation of you as a person of color being lazy or being this or being that. But to your point of inserting joy, I'm thankful that the allies in my life, this is not a new journey for them. Long before this moment started that were happening in 2020, they were already doing this work and were already on this path and already believed. Now, this is not to discount anyone who is just coming to this realization, because at whatever time it happens, if you were today years old, as the young people say, then that's great. Whatever day it happens, we're happy. Welcome. You know, but you know, my most joyful moments are when I have an opportunity to spend time with my white friends and or white allies, and they see me. You know, again, they see me, they see the value that I bring to the relationship, and you know that there's true reciprocity in the relationship. Those are moments of joy. I mentioned to you when we got introduced, my husband is an avid cyclist, and he was unfortunately hit by a car on his bike. He was in the bike lane, and a young driver, the sun was going down, so it was an accident. And my friends all gathered together to put together what's called a meal train to have meals delivered to my home for 3 weeks immediately following his accident. And I will tell you, every single day, a woman it's Asian women, white women, Black women, Hispanic women, you know, and it just that is the joy when I look at my village and when my children can look at my village. And it is a reflection of love and respect and true joy and true authentic support, because that's when you know that people are in your corner, is when something like that happens and they are there for you. You know, and so that is how you can insert joy. Show up and be there for a person of color, and not just when it can add value to your life, but do something to add value to their life, expecting nothing in return. And not, it doesn't have to be monetary. It could just be, I mean, I had a Facebook friend that we probably met in person once, and she mailed pretzels that my family could throw in the oven. I mean, it just, the love and the support that was poured into my family when that happened from so many different corners of my life, just really, it brought joy. And it let me know that the work that I do, when you read my bio about connecting communities and people, like that was it coming to fruition. And that was the tangible proof that the work that I'm doing matters and the connections that I'm making matter. And it's not just about me connecting, you know, myself or my brand, but it's really about people connecting with one another, which that is what I hope that my legacy will be. And I hope that anyone watching this, you know, when we think about the legacy that we leave, I want to leave a legacy of someone who helped leave this world better than I found it. And if I can't leave it better, that I definitely didn't make it worse.
Right, absolutely. That's awesome. I think we have one last question from the comments here. Are there some hiring practices you would recommend for companies to widen their pool of applicants? And what can we do to address a larger environment of inequity as opposed to individual instances of allyship? Any big stroke requests that can be made about practices and policies?
Sure. So this is something that comes up often. I am a member of Professional Dimensions, and for those of you who may not be familiar, it is a professional women's network, 42 years old at this point, in the city of Milwaukee, made up of women from various backgrounds, a lot of executives and in corporate and business owners. And so the Professional Dimensions Ideation Summit is actually coming up on September 29th. And that summit each year, and this is just the second year, is focused around inclusive leadership. And one of the segments is called "The Problem Is Not the Pipeline," because that's a question that we get asked often. It's like, well, I can't find any candidates of color that, fit, into, and I would say, who are you connecting with from a staffing perspective that they don't have a long enough pole that they can fish for candidates of color? Because if you called me, I could give you some names right away, usually, of some people that would qualify for almost any job. You have to be careful with that because we don't want to discriminate against anyone. So don't go out and say, I want candidates of color if you're watching. However, you can say you want a diverse set of, diverse pool of people to choose from. So I really recommend any leaders watching this, and especially the person watching who asked that question, to look into the Ideation Summit. Your company may already be sponsoring people to go to it. A lot of large companies are in the city, but then also for an individual, it's just $25 to register. I make no money off this. This was not a promo by any means, but I just think, again, we talked about opportunities to educate. It's virtual, and this is all about, what's next for inclusive leaders. And so that The Problem Is Not the Pipeline is just one of 4 breakout sessions, but the whole summit, and it's just from 8 to noon on that Tuesday, the 29th, is around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there's going to be some amazing speakers talking about how do we move this thing forward, especially in the workplace, which definitely impacts community.
Awesome. Well, I am so happy. I mean, this was such an amazing conversation, and thanks to everyone who asked questions and had comments. Please join me in thanking Chauntel McKenzie for being here tonight. Thank you so much, Chauntel, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. It was great conversation, and I can't wait to call you later and talk some more. Also, a big thank you to our Facebook Live audience for your time, as well as your comments and engaging questions. We hope you found this presentation enlightening and inspiring. Please plan on joining Tosa Talks again next Thursday, September 24th, when our Government Department and Organization Track Facebook Live presentation will feature Wauwatosa Mayor Dennis McBride. Please feel free to reach out to Tosa Together anytime through our Facebook page, our website, or by emailing us at tosatogether@gmail.com. This is Sienna Lytle from Tosa Together, and it has been my pleasure to be here with you all tonight. Thanks again for being a part of Tosa Talks and the effort to build a diverse, thriving community. Bye.